Hello and welcome to Think Like a Game Designer. I'm your host, Justin Gary. In this podcast, I speak with world-class game designers and creative pioneers across multiple industries. Each episode takes you on a deep dive into the creative process, exploring the nuances of game design and the extensive cultural, technological, and business factors influencing various creative fields. Tune in for practical tips and inspiring insights that will expand your creative perspective, whether it's inside the gaming realm or beyond. I have something I am so excited to finally announce. If you are serious about designing games, not just thinking about games, not just listening to the podcast and dreaming about games, but actually finishing your own designs, then I have created something for you. It is the brand new Think Like a Game Designer Design Lab. It is a step-by-step system that I have created and tested with dozens of other creators and other aspiring designers that includes over 60 lessons to take you from generating ideas to building prototypes to finding playtesters, refining your core design loop, all the way through publishing, running a crowdfund, and even getting hired in the industry. You'll also get access to my private design Discord filled with me, members of the Stoneblade team, and other creators all actively building games. Plus, I've got some incredible bonuses for people who join right now and for longtime fans of the podcast. If you're ready to stop pretending and start actually designing games with intention, check out the Think Like a Game Designer Design Lab at justingarydesigns.com. In today's episode, I speak with Chad Ellis. Chad is a game enthusiast, strategist, and designer. He published games under the Your Move Games brand, including Battleground Fantasy Warfare, which is a really innovative way to take miniatures games and play them entirely with cards. He is a Harvard MBA grad, and we actually dive deep into a lot of the strategies that come from his Harvard MBA, including really a masterclass on negotiation that can apply to you whether you're running a business or even if you just have regular interactions with other people in your life. Honestly, maybe one of the most important things I've recorded on this podcast. And we deep dive on Boda, Borg, Boston, which is a 30,000 square foot interactive game space where he designs games and creates a ton of really fascinating design challenges and problems that you get to interact with live. We deep dive into it, and I'm actually going to go visit this location myself after Gen Con this year, so I'm excited to check it out. But Chad is a really brilliant mind, great human being, and we share some of the really fascinating stories from the Magic Pro Tour days and what it was like to play as part of the Your Move Games team, including the story of why I missed Chad's wedding, and a lot of his best friends missed Chad's wedding, which is great. I'll let him tell it in the episode. But lots of great insights, lots of really fun stories. A great episode all around. So without any further ado, here is Chad Ellis. Hello and welcome. I am here with Chad Ellis. Chad, man, it's so good to have you on the podcast.
It's so good to be here.
So you have known me since I was an itty bitty, so much so that we went to a movie together and did not realize that it was a 21 and plus theater. So I got locked out of the theater and had to go watch it in a different area than the rest of y'all. And I think I got made fun of for several years thereafter.
You did, but you did make up for it years later at Gen Con when we went out to a bar, and I didn't drink back then at all, but we went to a bar and they asked for ID, and I had left my wallet at home. And I don't think I've ever seen you as happy as when I had to go sit just outside the bar area where the kids were allowed to be.
That is correct. That was a precious moment for me.
Good revenge.
Now that we're both old enough that nobody's bothering to card us, these are fun stories from back in the day.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different areas that we can talk about, and several that I want to, both from the game design side, the business side, the Magic history side. But I think let's just start with your origin story, right? How did you get into games? What kind of got you excited about being in this space at all?
Yeah, so I've always been a huge nerd, in particular a huge gaming nerd. So I started playing chess and Monopoly when I was like 5 and 6 years old, and would play obsessively with kind of any strategy game there was back then. The top strategy games were like Risk. We didn't have the things that we have now, but I played everything and was just obsessed by it. I ran D&D games, and I played anything competitively that I could if there was competition, and friendly if there wasn't. I got very into chess through college and a little bit after that. And then got really into magic, particularly in grad school when I was at HBS. And that was where I was in shooting distance of your move games. So I started heading over there to play games, learned about regular magic play because I just played with friends around a table, like 5 people playing giant decks, and got really into the scene there, started going to Pro Tour qualifiers and then to the Pro Tour. And then I finished my MBA and was still playing while I was doing other stuff. And then at some point, I was finishing a job. I was working in Germany for Siemens Mobile, of all things. And that job was coming to an end. And I was talking with our good friend Rob Doherty about what I was going to do next. And I said, I really don't know. There's all these possibilities. What I'd really like to do would be to design and publish games. And Rob was like, I want to do the same thing. Why don't we do that? So we decided to publish games together under Your Move Games. That was really fun, but not financially successful. And we had some games we were very proud of, and I've no regrets about it. It was also a great time because my kids were young and I'd just gotten married and I wanted to be at home with the kids. So I was able to work from home.
So, okay, that's a lot there, and I know there's a lot
That's a
as
lot,
well.
yeah.
So, yeah, so I'm gonna rewind the clock a little bit here,
Sure.
right? First of all, you just breezed over the HBS for Harvard Business School. So you were, and I have always been intrigued by business school in general, right? So I never went to business school. I learned the ropes through working first at Upper Deck and then just figuring things out on my own. But then I have since taught multiple classes at the Wharton School of Business. And then I did the math on how much those students spent for the hours that I was teaching them.
And you were underpaid?
I was very underpaid. But I do think that there's a lot of value to these kinds of educational experiences. And I would love to distill some of that, right? So you applied this working at Siemens, a huge corporation. You applied this presumably to the emotionally satisfying but not financially successful ventures with Rob. What lessons for somebody that's listening out there and I was wondering what business school has to offer, or what maybe you could distill from that if they're not going to be able to make it to HBS anytime soon, what would you take as a kind of somebody who wants to leverage some core business knowledge in the gaming industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if I was describing business school, it's really a series of interesting conversations about business problems. And so there are, the classes have agendas and names and things, and you're going to learn portfolio theory or this or that. But for the most part, every class, you have a business problem that you've all read about. And then you spend the class with a facilitated discussion about that problem. So, in some ways, it's very similar to just learning in the real world, except that you pay for it instead of getting paid. But I think the best thing about it is like any conversation, it's the people in the conversation. The irony of a place like Harvard Business School, what makes it such a great place to go? Because I do think it's a great place to go. And the professors are outstanding, but the professors would be the first one to tell you the reason that it's the number one business school is because it's the number one business school. So people really want to go there. So they're able to create classes of people with really different backgrounds who can contribute to this conversation. And it's a great experience, but it really is a lot like just sitting around a table and talking about a problem with people who have a lot of different insights to it.
Yeah, I love that framing of it, and I couldn't agree more. I had the same experience in my college. The going to an Ivy League college was cool. Yes, classes were great, professors were great, but it was the people and the relationships I built, and then the great conversations we were having, both in and outside of class, that are the things that shaped me and added value. And I'm going to use this as an easy tie-in back because I want to talk about the magic that was Your Move Games a little bit.
Yeah.
This was, for me, it was a turning point in my career and my life because I grew up in South Florida. I played with the people that were there and I did pretty well. But when I started going to school in New Hampshire, I was close enough to Boston that I could start building relationships with everybody there, and then driving in to go to play at Your Move Games. And eventually I moved to Boston, and by far the best performance of my entire career. And we could talk about specifically Pro Tour Houston and some of how you personally relate to that story as well. But there was something really incredible about the people in that space and how we pushed each other, and how that environment, I think how you craft your social environment, whether it be through an exclusive thing like Harvard Business School, or literally moving to a place where the best players are for your game, or where the companies are that you want to join and be a part of. That's so powerful. So maybe you could just paint that picture a little bit, because there's not a lot of people I have on the podcast that are as close to that and know that experience as well as I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way you framed it is exactly right. It's the people and the relationships that challenge you and push you. And I would say you want to be in relationships with people where you are both a teacher and a student, and so are they, all the time. And the real magic, and to say also that you bring different things to the table that are complementary. So the real magic, I think, about that team was partly that it was a bunch of people who were really talented, but also that they were talented in different ways. You had Rob was this mad genius who could come up with ideas that were, oh my God, how are you thinking about that? And he would take them to the logical extreme and come up with these kind of crazy decks. Darwin was like an engine of consistency and refining stuff down. And and if something wasn't working, Darwin would always be ready to say, okay, that's not working. I'm going to try this. And he would dive into that. And all of the players, Dave Humphreys, everyone was coming in with real skills. And nobody had an ego that said, I'm not going to learn from that person, or what my idea is the right idea. And I sort of joke, when Dave Humphreys and I first played, I did so badly that I think he thought I was a bad player even when I qualified for the Pro Tour. I think that must have been a fluke.
Everyone's a bad player relative to Dave Humphreys. He's
But
very
he
good.
was sort of superhuman. But I think despite all that, when Dave and I would talk about Magic, he always listened. He was not like, oh yeah, you're this bad player. If you asked him who was better, him or me, I'm sure he would have said he was, and he'd be right. But everyone was learning from everybody, and that meant everybody could be a teacher for everybody. And that's just an incredible environment.
Yeah. And so then could not agree more. I love the phrase. You want to be in relationships with people where you are both a teacher and a student at the same time is beautifully phrased. And I think this culminates, from my perspective, in what we were able to do at Pro Tour Houston, because there was Darwin, Rob, and I were all played different decks. We'd all tested the experience separately. We tested for months and months, all refining each other to the point where we finished we finished the Pro Tour pretty successfully. But I'll let you tell part of this story, because you were not there.
I was not there.
We were unbelievably sad to be there because of a very specific reason.
Yeah. When Trish and I got married, I reached out to, I think it was Mark Rosewater, but I reached out to one of the senior folks at Wizards and said, look, I know that you haven't published the Pro Tour schedule yet, but I'm getting married. And a lot of my friends are going to have a conflict if there's a Pro Tour on the weekend that we're getting married. So he said, all right, don't tell anyone this, but this weekend is clear. He told me when the Pro Tour was going to be in Houston, and we scheduled the wedding around the Pro Tour. And then they found out there was going to be a big football game in Houston the weekend they'd originally planned, and so they moved it. And so our wedding, which in addition to be a fun wedding, was a medieval themed wedding where everyone was in costume, got moved to be the same weekend as the Pro Tour. And I remember my in-laws in particular, I think my family understood anything I said about gaming. They're like, okay, yeah, Chad and his friends are all super nerds. But my in-laws were all really horrified that my closest friends were not coming to the wedding because they had to go play a game. And I was like, no, it's like for Rob, it's like his whole job. And they're all really serious about this. And I was building it up. And then you guys came in and just took first, second, and third and won the team tournament, right? Like you crushed everything.
Yeah, we finished at the end of the Swiss rounds. We finished first, second, and third seeds, which meant that we didn't have to play each other until later on in the top 8. And then in the top 8, we did not lose a single game to anyone other than each other.
Yeah, it was insane. Yeah. The most dominating Pro Tour performance that any team has had. But the key thing from my in-laws' perspectives was I was able to explain to them how much money you had all won. And then they were all like, oh, okay, we get it now.
Yeah. And I was, because we were all heartbroken to not be at the wedding. And it was, I do think, a part of the motivation to do really well in the Pro Tour.
Yeah, you couldn't
if we had
scrub out.
scrubbed out, they were just assholes, right?
Yeah.
But winning the whole thing really did help us at least justify it and get to come back and celebrate properly afterwards with you.
Yeah. I'd forgotten that you guys didn't lose a single game to anyone who wasn't on the team. So that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was great. And it was like, it's literally like the dream scenario. Like when you go to these events and you could be like, Rob and I were rooming together, and it's always, all right, buddy, you get first and I'll get second. No, I'll get first, you get second. And that's exactly what happened. And we had the trophies in our room at the end of the weekend. It was magical. It was magical. Yeah. So it's a great story. And again, just to speak to the broader lessons, it really was like, I have written about and talked about like the testing process that we went through for not just for that Pro Tour, but for all of them, where we would just rigorously play. We would deconstruct each other's plays, deconstruct the decks, help each other out. That no ego, willingness to learn, surrounding yourself with smart people where you're constantly pushing each other. There is nothing like that, no matter what your career or field is, to really accelerate.
No, it's absolutely right. And you need to have that.
Yeah. And so now I want to talk about this starting the business with Rob, because in many ways, I was the beneficiary of your hard work and lessons learned, because when Rob and you had started off as your games publishing, and you did, what was it, the Battlegrounds, which was a really clever idea for a game.
Battlegrounds, Battle for Hill 218, My Kind of Town, and Station Assault.
Very good quality games, but challenging to succeed here. And so what was that? Because you had to learn everything from the ground up. And so maybe walk me through that, because first of all, it's so much easier to do this stuff nowadays than it was back then, but still very difficult. So maybe just take me into that journey a little bit, and how did you decide your games? How did you get stuff made? What was that like?
Yeah, I think so. I remember on one of your other podcasts talking about the freedom that comes with being dumb and broke. And we had a different situation, which I think in some ways was good, but in some ways we might have been better if we were dumb and broke, which we were reasonably smart, and both of us had enough of a financial cushion that we could do this for a while. And so we dove in and figured, okay, we'll learn this as we go. And the real focus was like, let's make games that we're really proud of and hope that the market will grab them. I don't think we appreciated the difficulty in rising above the noise and getting a game to where it was recognized, and then also to where it was sustainably growing. Our first board game, Succession, was a very fun game. I'm very proud of it. It definitely had some design flaws that now, no surprise, your first game is not your best game. But it was really interesting when we were like going through the marketing phase and realizing there was no Kickstarter then. It was not easy to generate awareness. And so we had this starting point because people knew about us through Your Move Games, but that was the Magic the Gathering crowd, which is very different from this kind of negotiation, funky board game. And we got what we thought was a really good start after launching at Gen Con. We had distribution. Our distributors seemed happy. We were getting good reviews. And then it petered. And we realized we didn't have something that was so good that it was generating buzz on its own, and we had not figured out really how to generate that kind of buzz. We did a better job. We learned from that, and when we launched Battleground Fantasy Warfare, which was the game that we thought could be our flagship game, we knew a lot more about how to get that out there, and we had a much more interesting story around that as being this like tabletop war game that didn't require all the miniatures.
Yeah, I thought this was a really clever idea to linger on. As a game design, right? The problem with miniatures games is they're very expensive. They take a lot of space to set up. There's a lot of challenges and little accessories and things you need. And you were able to compress that all and have your armies represented by cards. The movement measurement was done via card lengths. Everything you could write on the cards to track damage and other things. I forget, you had randomization. Did you randomize with dice? Okay, yeah. And so I thought it was very clever, but it also, as someone who now, I've worked on a bunch of miniatures games, including Gundam Assemble, which is coming out later this year. And your premise that the problem with miniatures games is that they have all these miniatures is actually, it's a feature, not a bug, right? The people who play miniatures games love the miniatures and love the coolness, and the table presence of it is a big deal. So you were what I think was smart, you're taking a gamble in an interesting space and making something that is very expensive and takes a lot of table space into something that was more compressed. And it was expandable, right? You could make a lot of
Yeah.
units and a lot of things, right? Unlike Succession, which is a little bit hard to expand as a
Yeah,
board game,
that was a
it's a
one-shot version.
social one-off game. What your threshold for success is really high, whereas a game that's a little bit more expandable, you could have a smaller audience that could
Exactly.
potentially support you.
And that's basically what we had. But Battleground was a profitable game. It just wasn't profitable enough to say, okay, this is our full-time job. I think the strength that Battleground had was that while you're right that miniatures are a feature, not a bug, they're also a bug because you can't, particularly with like large scale tabletop games, not just the financial investment, but the setup time, the transportation. And what we kept hearing back from miniature gamers was two things really. One, the system, which was really Rob's creation, was such a good system that they were playing it with miniatures sometimes. Like they preferred it to a lot of the other rule sets that they had. But the other thing was that this opened up gaming opportunities that were closed off to them otherwise. This was something they could play on a lunch break. This was something they could play while you're waiting for the rest of the group to show up for the giant melee that you're going to have. This was just super portable. You could take it on a trip. And so that part worked quite well. I think what got us was we never got the channel, the retail stores, to see us as an ally because for them, there was this fear that if I hook a miniature player on Battleground, I'm going to stop selling him super expensive miniatures and start selling him decks of cards. And so they had to believe that this was going to be an and rather than an or. So we definitely found a lot of the miniature focused retailers were hesitant to push the game because they were worried about cannibalizing their real margin.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So there's a couple of threads here in terms of understanding how to reach your customer and understanding how to position your game, right? So there's the am I targeting miniatures players who want something they could play at a lunch break? Am I targeting card game players who would never make the leap to miniatures? Am I targeting someone else entirely?
Yeah.
And I don't know where your thought was or if that was just something that evolved. And then the follow up to that is like, how do I, my interim customer is the store, right? Especially where you don't have crowdfunding as an option. You have to be able to sell to the stores and get them excited. So you've got to convince those people to come in. So how do you think about both of those problems, targeting your end customer as well as targeting that middleman that's so critical?
Yeah, it's tough. So if I think about the end customers, there's an expression that I think it came out of consulting originally, but I think it applies to a lot of things, which is bad clients drive out good ones. And that there are a lot of ways to think about that, but the way that I think is the most common is the resources that you're spending chasing one group are resources you're not spending chasing others. And the focus that you're doing, if your communication is capturing one group, that's at least diluting the message that you're having with others. So there's a trade-off. If you want to attract people who are like, oh, I have no interest in painting figures, but I like war games, I like card games, I might try that. And you're also thinking about getting hardcore miniature gamers to see this as a fantastic rule set that also opens up play opportunities they wouldn't have. Those are very different messages. And so thinking about who are you trying to communicate, how are you going to do it, and can you actually communicate to all the groups you want to, or are you going to be diluting your message is a really big challenge.
So how do you decide, how do you know who's the bad client, who's the good client in this case? That's the hard question, right?
I think a lot of times you don't know. And I think one of the things about that, and this is one of the places where conventions can be so good because you get to spend a lot of time in front of a lot of people and you get to see how they react. And that can be if you've got a prototype of a game and you can get people playing it and you can start to see how different groups of people react. Or if you have a game that you've published and you're going to conventions, don't just think of it as a place you're selling the game or even just marketing the game. Think of it as a place where you're learning about the market response. You're going in and seeing how do people who play this type of game play. So we went to conventions that were miniature game conventions and where people would come over and look at us like, why do we have a table with a card game on it? And then we would also go to Gen Con and things like that. And at Gen Con, we would then talk to the miniature game players, but we would have the Dungeons and Dragons players suddenly being like, oh man, maybe we could use this for when we have large scale army battles. Like we've had crazy things like that. ultimately, you don't get to decide who likes your stuff. You can affect it by design changes, but ultimately, your customers get to decide if they like it. And you can force your communication towards a group of people who maybe aren't listening, or you can see who's listening and follow that along.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that plays into the core message of all of product creation, obviously game design specifically, which is you don't know till you test. Right?
Yeah,
You have to be able to get stuff in front of your target customer or who you think is your target customer, see how they actually react to your product, and adjust your strategy or your product or your marketing accordingly.
yeah,
There's nothing more important than, and I think this is just a perennial problem, right? How do I get to the customers? How do I get them? How do I get to stores? How do I communicate? How do I get them to demand the thing? In many ways, you faced a lot of challenges because you were starting your company in an era where it was very hard to make things.
yeah,
It was very limited options, and getting your quality control and producing stuff was very difficult. But on the flip side, that meant there was a lot less competition in the marketplace.
yes, absolutely.
Today, it's so much easier to make things than it's ever been, and there's so much, and that's great for being creative and being able to make stuff, but it also means the marketplace is unbelievably crowded. I
Yeah,
forget the numbers, but it's thousands and thousands of games are getting released every year on tabletop, and it's very hard to get a store who has their own challenges and knows that they can turn a certain number of seats for Magic every week and a certain
yeah,
number for the other hit games, and you're trying to come in with, and I'll just say it, your games were very well designed. The Battlegrounds is a great game, but very hard to break through that noise without an
yeah.
IP, without a big marketing budget, so I don't know if you've got lessons learned from there or tips that might still apply today for people that are trying to break into the space, but it's a very common complaint and concern I hear.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true, and I think you described it exactly right. It was harder to make stuff then, but there was a lot less stuff being made. So if you had a better chance of breaking out, I think the key thing I would say when you're testing, don't just test a hypothesis. You have to have an idea that you're testing. So not just I've made this game and now people are going to play test and I'm going to see how they like it. That can be on your very first prototype. You just have some people and you're finding big flaws. But when you get to where you're really thinking about, okay, we might launch this, we want to bring this out, you need to have a hypothesis about who do you think is going to be interested in this game, and what will that look like? How big is that segment? How will you reach them? And then when you've got that hypothesis, think about how can I test that? And how can I test it in a way that's not too expensive and where I'm going to get information back quickly? And then you can do another test with a refined hypothesis. And then the other thing is you need to be ready to abandon the hypothesis. The whole point of testing a hypothesis is it may be false, it may be wrong. You may think, for Battleground, for an example, that this is going to really appeal to regular card gamers who always looked at the miniatures and said, I'm not a painter, I don't want to spend all that money, but that game looks really cool. But that could be wrong. You might think that miniature gamers are going to be really excited about the idea of a tabletop tactical war game that they can carry around and build out anytime they want, but that's going to feel natural to them. But you may be wrong. And you need to figure it out. But also, it may be that you're right, but there's a barrier. So, like with the miniature gamers, we had to get them to look at this game a little differently. But once they did, they liked it. So for us,
Mhm.
it became a lot about how do we bully someone into trying this out? And
Right.
so having demo games, little things like that, where we could show people, get them excited about the movement, get them excited about the fog of war effect. And then the game kind of sold itself to them because they appreciated the game system.
Yeah, I think I obviously echo the message: iterate with a hypothesis, test and learn as quickly and cheaply as possible. Don't have your ego attached to you. You have to be able to kill your babies when your current belief is not proven out by the world. And I think the other thing that I want to key off of is what you described at the end, which I refer to as the hook point. Knowing where in your product, in your game, is the point where you watch their eyes go, oh,
Yes.
wow, I
Yes.
got it. And
Yeah.
then they're hooked and they're in. And
Yeah.
how do you remove every single ounce of friction between you, that person looking at the thing that you have and getting to that hook point is everything.
Yeah. And how can you speed up the hook point? For us, it was making very short, quick demo things that we could say to somebody, give me 5 minutes, give me 3 minutes, and show them how it played out.
Yeah. And there are alternatives too of how to get your increase investment and interest up front to buy you more time to get to the hook point.
Yeah.
So I'll use this as an example. So after the Year Move Games, product cycle and learnings, then I partnered with Rob Doherty to
Yeah.
make Ascension, and
Yeah.
I was able to draft behind a lot of your lessons learned on the production side, and I bringing Ascension to Gamma at that 16 years ago now was critical because one, my hook point was very quick, right? If as soon as you shuffled your deck the first time, it happened, right? So turn
Yeah.
3, we got you. So it's 5 minutes from when I get you to sit down.
Yeah.
And almost by accident, because we didn't remember to bring tokens to track the honor, and I picked up those little beads from Michael's that were
I
the
remember
little
those.
fishbowl beads,
Yeah.
and we used those instead, and that became everybody that came by was like, "Ooh, what's this? This is
Yeah.
exciting. Are these in the game?" And Rob and I just look at each other like, "Yes,
Yes,
they
they
are."
are.
And that was enough to get people to pay attention, because even that 5 minutes to the hook point of I played 2 turns, I shuffled my deck, I see what's happening. That's
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
to get somebody
Yes.
that's walking around a convention to pay attention. And so
Yeah.
having something to draw you in, shrinking the time to get to that hook point, knowing where your hook point is, and then driving everything about your marketing and your initial experience to that. And then that person, once they're there, if you've got a great product, they become an evangelist and they can now help sell your game for you, which is exactly what happened with Ascension when we first started showing it to people. So what now I know I want to transition from here into Boda Borg, but I don't know the full story of like what happened in between, the kind of the from the Year Move Games aspect. And you kept running with the Battlegrounds for quite a while.
Yeah, I kept running with Battleground for a while. We reached a point, Rob had some other things that he wanted to do. So we worked out a deal where I would keep doing Battleground for a while and he would follow up with his thing. Eventually, Battleground was sold to some of the player enthusiasts who continued to launch new products in that brand. So they're still making that
That's
making.
wonderful. That
Yeah,
is
it was
wonderful.
very satisfying. It would have been even more satisfying if I'd been able to turn it into a full business that I'd still do today, but it was great.
Yeah, listen, I know you part of the whole not be ready to abandon your hypothesis means like not every game is going to last forever. Right?
Exactly.
That's just most of them do not. And it's fortunate to have an audience, and it's fortunate to be able to have something, but to even just be able to create something that lives on past your involvement and
Yeah.
that people can be engaged with and do, that's a huge accomplishment. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I was really happy with it. And the nice thing about coming from a investment banking and then business school background was that I didn't depend on this to pay the mortgage. So I could say, okay, you know what? This was great. I did this for a while. It's time to do something new. There was a little while where I was only playing games. I wasn't inside the game world. Trish and I were raising kids. I worked for Planned Parenthood of Massachusetts for a while. I was their CFO. I'd started off consulting with them to help them solve some problems that they had. They asked me to come on board for a while. The main thing I did was use my negotiation background to get them better reimbursement deals with the insurance companies that they were partnered with. And once that was done, it was not really the right place for me to be, but never regret my time with that great organization.
Let's pause there. Let's talk about negotiation backgrounds,
Yeah.
because I went to law school, and I will tell you my favorite part of it by far were the negotiation competitions
Yes.
and learning that skill set.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting competitive mindset to it, but also collaborative mindset, right? A negotiation is
Yeah.
not a I win, you lose. It's ideally we find the largest version of the pie and then we
Exactly.
divide it up where hopefully I get a decent slice, but it's not the same as a game of Magic. And
Yeah.
maybe it's worth for people out there that for whom negotiation is either a dirty word or a scary concept. Maybe we
Yeah.
could give some tips, because I think it's something that comes up in everybody's life.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to actually blog about negotiation because I think it's such an important topic and it is one that a lot of people misunderstand. I think you put it exactly right. Negotiation has a good negotiation. Like there are some things where it's just what is the price? And there's nothing other than the price and it's just I want the highest price for what I'm selling you and you want the lowest price and we haggle. Those are boring. But most negotiations are much more open-ended and there's a lot of opportunities to grow the pie. But then simultaneously, as you're growing the pie, each person does have an eye on how much of the pie can they get. And so there's this weird tension where the more we collaborate, the more we share our truest interests, the more you know exactly what I really value, and the more I know exactly what you really value, the more likely we are to come up with creative ways to expand the pie. But also, the easier it is, the more vulnerable we become, the easier it is for the other person to take advantage of that knowledge to carve out most of the pie for themselves. And then the other thing about negotiations is that a lot of them are not one offs. If you go to a car dealership and buy a car, maybe you go back there another time, but basically that's a one time transaction. If you are negotiating things with a business partner over the long term, or with a really key supplier, or your romantic partner, these are all things where we do negotiate, even if we don't think about it in the same way. And those negotiations, it's not just how well you did in that negotiation, but how well your partners feel about how it went and what your reputation is with them. And if you win by taking advantage of a weakness that they have, that is not a win. That is not going to be you're not going to be in your interest in the long run.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. And I adopted this philosophy in business. It took me a little while to break from the mindset of a gamer and I just want to win and get
Yeah,
whatever I
yeah.
but and I adopted this mindset where I want everybody that does a deal with me to walk away being like, holy crap, I got a great deal.
And
Like
that is,
that was amazing. And because they are going to want to do business with me again, because they are going to have that goodwill that's going to pay off way more dividends than anything else that particular transaction could have gotten me if I eked out my maximum advantage.
yeah, I think that's 100% correct, because not only will they want to do business with you, but you will build that reputation. If you have a reputation as somebody who is always finding ways to grow the pie, cares that everyone is getting a good result, deals honestly with people, is a creative problem solver that figures out ways to get people to where they want to be, then people who have never done business with you are going to hear about that. If someone's thinking about partnering with you and they start asking around, like this Justin Gary character, what is it like to deal with him? And everybody says, oh, you can really trust him. He's going to come up with a great deal. Every time I've worked with him, it's been fantastic. That matters. And I've taken very much the same approach. Every time I go into a negotiation, my focus is how do we make this the best? I try to be as transparent as I reasonably can be, and try to make something that is a good deal for everybody. The one caution about that is if you are working with people who have a very different mindset from that, not only will they not appreciate it, they won't understand it. And so, for example, I like to come into something with a proposition that is pretty reasonable and that I would be happy with, and that I think the other person could reasonably be happy with. And I understand that most people are going to want to haggle a little bit. But I have learned that with some people, they assume that whatever initial offer you make is a crappy, give me the moon offer,
Yeah.
and adjust accordingly. And no matter how much you have a reputation, no matter how much you lay the groundwork for how you're thinking about this, they will assume you've just made an agreement an offer that you think is outrageous, and they will then come in with something much, much worse than that for you, and think that, okay, now we meet in the middle. Whereas you see you've come in at a good place for everybody, and now they're doing something crazy. So you have to be careful with how you approach it. You have to make sure you understand how the other person sees the negotiation. But I definitely agree with you that in the long run, your reputation, your peace of mind, your relationships are all much, much better if you focus on making sure everybody walks out happy with the deal.
Yeah, and it is you mentioned this earlier, but I just want to underscore it's a creative game to play.
It
Like
is,
the
absolutely.
people will get focused on one thing like the price or the number or whatever, but there's a lot of other things like, do I have to pay you now or later? Are there other things that could come along with this? Is there a opportunities to lease versus buy? Is there a scenario where you could actually tie an extra deal into this thing, or have something that they don't care about at all that's actually really important to you that you could throw in? That would be there's a million really
Absolutely.
interesting ways to build structure, right? I even just brought somebody in from my game design course who I wanted to hire onto the team, and he says, look, I love the idea. I appreciate the offer, but I really want to start my own business. I've got this vision of what I want to do. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. What does that look like? When do you plan to start? He's like, oh, I need at least a year. I need time to build the thing. I'm like, okay, great. How about you work part-time and I help you get your business going. And I
Yeah.
can provide you with a lot of insights that you would need, and you can help me with my projects while we're doing it. And you could see how I run my business. And suddenly it was like, oh, it went from the no, I can't do this
Yeah.
to suddenly everybody's winning and has a much better situation where being creative about, okay, what do you actually care about? What do I care about? How do we find extra value transforms the entire equation.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a key idea of getting people to go from positions to interests. You know, most deals people are going to say, here's an amount that I want or a term that I want, and getting them to think, okay, let's set aside the demands, let's aside the positions that we're going for. What are the goals? What are the interests? What do you want to have? And that's a great example, the one you just had. He was saying no because in his mind, taking the job would block what he wanted to do. And once you got him talking about the why, then you were able to come up with a solution that not didn't just not stop him, but it actually helped him do what he wanted to do while still achieving the interest that you had.
Yeah. And when I do this, I think this is just important and to linger on it too, because I view this as critical for long term across the board. Right. I do quarterly reviews with everybody on my team, and we do a deeper dive annually where it's like, what is your vision of where you want to be in 3 years? What are your dreams of what it is? And sometimes their vision does not align with what's right with my company. At
Yeah.
which point I will tell them, hey, I could help you get another job somewhere else and we could work on a transition because this isn't the right fit for you. Or if I know where they want to go and I'd be like, okay, cool. We can't do that project now, but let's plan to spool something up that would fit that role or grow you into that role or whatever. There's so many different opportunities that are available. And when you show one, that you're interested in their interests, and two, that you're able to, you care, right? That's not just
Yeah.
about what do I get from this equation, but I want you to feel good about those things too. Again, that's how you build long-term relationships and have a happier team and customers too, right? The exact same thing applies if you have players of your game that are making requests of what you should be doing for your organized play or what they'd like to see in the next release or a customer service complaint, etc. There are a lot of ways, especially now that we've moved to the more modern era where we're crowdfunding, right? A lot of
Yeah.
Stoneblade's business is crowdfunding. Our relationship with our customers and showing them that we are responsive to their needs, even when sometimes what they're asking for is economically crazy for us or we can't
Yeah.
deliver exactly
Yeah.
the thing that they want. Being able to show that we're listening and find ways to address those. We don't always do it perfect, but it's critical for exactly this kind of marketing and long-term success too.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just to flip this back into gaming terms, when you shift a negotiation conversation so that you're both talking about what are we trying to achieve, it's like you've turned a game from a competitive game to a co-op. And there's nothing wrong with competitive games, but imagine playing a co-op game where it's hard enough to achieve the objective, but actually now you're all playing against each other. There are some co-op games that are designed with that as an extra feature, but much harder to actually get to the best result if you're all competing against each other. So if you can turn a negotiation into a cooperative venture, you're going to get much better results.
Yeah, love that. Okay, we've got a good detour there. I think hopefully that was useful to people. In fact, if you've listened to that section and you take it in, I promise you that will probably be more useful than almost anything else that I've covered in this podcast because negotiation is a part of every aspect of life, your relationships with your partner, your family, your kids, your coworkers, everything. And being able to do this in a way that's sustainable and healthy and moves everybody's interest forward is super powerful. Fun semi detour of game stuff. All right, I want to make sure we got enough time for Boda Borg because this is really cool, and I have not talked to a lot of game designers / business owners in this space. So describe Boda Borg and what it is and how you got into it, and let's dive in.
Yeah, picture 30,000 square feet of space with 24 different quests. Each quest is a set of mental and physical challenges that each take place in their own room. So you can break out of prison, you can do an obstacle course, you can find out what the government's up to in Area 51. All different levels of physicality. We have stuff that you can do in wheelchairs, we have stuff that is Ninja Warrior level, and everything in between. And people get to choose whichever quest they want to do, try them as many times as they want. What makes it really different from everything else that I've done, and I think this will definitely appeal to you because it's all about failure. So most challenge activities, if you think of an escape room for an example, it's designed around success. The sort of ideal escape room experience is with a few minutes left to spare, you solve the final challenge and you succeed. And escape rooms are designed with the idea that not everyone's going to succeed, but a good percentage of people will. The hint structure is very often explicitly aimed at getting people over the edge. And the idea is we want you to get close, we want all the excitement, but then we want you to succeed. Boda Borg flips that around completely. When you go into one of our challenges, you don't know what your objective is. You don't know what you're not allowed to do, but if anybody breaks the rules, the team fails. And from the moment you open the door to a challenge, you've got 2 minutes or less before you run out of time. So everybody fails everything. But when you fail, you come out of the quest, you talk to your team, and you can try again as many times as you want. You can also move to a different quest, try that out, and maybe come back to that one. But just like what we've been talking about in terms of the design process, it's all about iteration, hypothesis testing, exploring, learning, trying again. So you don't know what the rules of the game are, but you figure them out by playing. You don't know what the objective is, but you come up with ideas and see if they work. And by doing that, you gradually conquer the quests.
Fascinating. I'm in. Okay, so as we were talking about before we started recording, I'm finally coming back out to Boston
Yeah, you definitely
after
have to
Gen
try it out.
Con. I'm coming. I want to try this. So I have many questions. First, where did the name Boda Borg come from? What does it mean?
Okay, the concept was originally started by three Swedish engineers, and they got a government grant to build their idea. And the city of Torpsamar, which is a very small city, like north of the Arctic Circle, said, "Here's this building nearby. It used to be a kind of hospital. You can have this space." Now, this was a big, imposing stone building, and it overlooked a tiny village called Boda. And the people of Boda used to joke that this was their castle built to protect them in medieval times. So they called it Castle Boda, which in Swedish is Boda Borg. And
Huh.
so the people who came up with this idea, they knew what they wanted to build, but they didn't have a great company name. And they heard about this and they said, "Great, that's going to be the name of our company," because they just loved the story. And so that became the name. And then it spread slowly through Sweden, and a group of Americans led by an American group of HBS guys. One of them was in Sweden on vacation, tried this with his family, loved it, but couldn't understand how it was surviving because the locations were all in the middle of nowhere. And so he started talking to them about it, and he got really passionate that this was this incredible concept that was surviving despite its locations, and what would happen if you brought it to a major city. So they got together as investors and acquired the IP from the original founders. But then they didn't have money to build a location. So they were like, "No problem. We'll go to VCs, we'll go to angels, we'll get money, we'll build a couple of locations." That turned out to be a hard sell. We have this remote Swedish physical brick and mortar gaming thing that doesn't do terribly well financially, but trust us, if we build it near a big city, it'll be great. And so for 4 years, I think, this guy was out pounding the pavement trying to find anybody who would be interested.
Huh.
And at one point, he decided, you know what? I'm going to go through the HBS alumni network and I'll put in keywords that relate to this and I'll find people that way. And one of them was gaming. And shockingly, that brought him to me. And I got an email from this guy I'd never met, never heard of, saying, "Hi, you don't know me, but I have this really cool reality gaming company. Would you talk with me about it?" And at first, I was just like, "How can I help this guy out?" Because I get those calls and I always take them. And we basically started talking once a week. He would send me the deck that he was using to raise money from investors. And he had an engineering background before business school. Mine was more finance and marketing, and his deck was terrible. It was all
Huh.
different fonts, and you couldn't tell what the product was, and you couldn't see why he was getting to the numbers he said he was going to get to. And so I worked with him on refining his pitch, and he was telling me about it, and it just sounded really cool. And I said, "You should think about Boston as one of your first cities, because we've got a really vibrant university system, like all these different colleges. We've got a very healthy company outings, team building market. And then we've got a lot of highly educated parents who want to do smart things with their kids and would be interested in doing this." And he was like, "No, we're probably going to start in California." And I was like, "Okay, but that's dumb. You should start here." And so this went on for probably a couple of months of me just giving him advice. He would come back, refine his pitch. And each time I would give him another reason he should think about Boston. And each time he would be very clearly not interested in Boston as his first city. And I just was getting frustrated because I thought Boston really would be a great city for this. And this sounds so cool. And I realized that I wanted to go, I wanted to bring my kids and let them do it. And finally I said, you know what? This is everything I love. It's the size of business. I like smaller businesses. I like being entrepreneurial. I love gaming in the biggest, broadest sense. And it overlaps with everything I'm good at. So I should go check this out. And so I went out to Sweden with him and went to two of the locations there and tried it out. And I was just blown away. I was like, this was so much fun. And I'm flying on the flight home and I'm thinking, okay, I got to put the rational hat on. This is a huge, crazy investment. It would basically be everything that we have and then going into debt. Yes, I can always go get a job afterwards, but this would be a big hit if it didn't work. And besides, the flight to Sweden was only $600. So I could still go back and quest again and finish these quests, some of the ones that I hadn't been able to finish. And I had this moment of, I am really going to go back to Sweden to, fly to Stockholm, drive an hour and a half to some tiny little town to do this. If I'm willing to do that, people will drive half an hour and come back over and over to do this here. So, yeah, I spent about a year looking for real estate and getting the financing in line and thinking about how we would promote this if it was something that we did. And finally got a space that I could use. It's not easy to find 30,000 square feet of space with two levels because some of the quests change levels. So we couldn't have it be just in one big old Best Buy or something like that. And that I could still somehow afford. So we got very lucky with a space and a landlord who had just bought a building that he thought he was going to have to sink a bunch of money into to turn it into apartments, and a broker that he knew had worked with us on a previous location that had fallen through, and said, I know a guy who, if the rent is right, might take this from you as is because he doesn't need any of that. And
Yeah.
we got together and it worked out.
Okay, so incredible story, great entrepreneurial spirit, and another evidence for the alumni network and the people that you were around creating
Absolutely.
opportunities.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the game design now.
Yeah,
I
sure.
think designing for a physical space is really interesting.
Yeah.
Designing for failure is really interesting.
Yeah.
How much of this was pre-baked, like they already had scenarios and quests, and how much of this did you have to do?
So when we opened all with quests that existed in the other locations. So we started out with the concept. We knew the quests that we wanted to do. For the most part, there were some that they were like, no, these are good, and those aren't here anymore. I went around and tried quests and really picked out the ones that I thought were really strong. After that, we started designing our own quests. So now we will probably take one quest a year from one of the European locations and design three on our own. But we also talk with those locations all the time. So we're not usually building from scratch. We're building on all the knowledge that we have from all the other quests that we've done.
So when I build games,
Yep.
I am able to quickly prototype them, either physical cards or
Yep.
mostly on tabletop simulator, or I create a quick digital app that I can,
Yep.
and that's a quick, cheap to test, easy to learn. But you're building physical things in a 30,000 square foot space
Yeah.
that cannot be easy to prototype and test.
No, it's in fact, most of our quests do not get prototyped and tested at all before they're built. It's insane. Yeah, I know this as someone in a more sane area of game design. I'm sure that makes you have a heart attack.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? What is the process? How often, what's your success rate? How often do you scrap these things?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So what I would say is we have to spend, when you can't prototype quickly and easily, you have to spend a lot more time just wrestling with what you want to do before you start going forward. So we scrap a lot of things. We scrap very few things that we've built. So we put a lot of time into what is the challenge? How are people going to experiencing, visualizing, asking questions of where can people go wrong? And then the other thing is that we build in as much as possible the ability to modify afterwards. Sometimes that can be changing the programming and we're not having to change the physical space at all. Sometimes it can be modifying the sensors. We built one challenge which is it's played on a table where you have a disc on the table and four strings that go to the corners, and people can pull on the strings to move the disc around the table. So that's a pretty straightforward idea, and you can easily build that and test and say, yeah, we're able to move it physically, this works. Then you say, okay, how does this work as a game? The table is a giant map and you're moving this piece around, and there are basically magnetic contacts which tell if you've gone out of bounds or where you've gone, as well as if you've reached a city or something like that. So when we first built it, the margin of error was tighter than we wanted it to be. And we were able to address that by removing some of the magnetic contacts so that you had a little bit more room to get off the road before it triggered a fail. Another thing
Okay.
that we can do in a situation like that is turn a fail into a partial fail. So it's not, okay, I've gone off the road slightly, boom, we failed, try the whole thing again. But it could be that you lose a little something or you get a warning and if it happens again. So there's ways that once we've designed it, we can tweak.
Okay, so certainly building some error room and room to adjust is helpful here, but I want to put us in the room
Yeah,
earlier than that, right? Because you said
sure.
we got to do a lot of planning and a lot of setup early. And I have found that there's the this is true in game production too, right? The bigger the scale of the thing, right? If I want to make World of Warcraft,
Yeah,
right, I've got to spend a lot more time thinking through. If I've got a team of engineers, the cost of building stuff's really high. Yeah, I could do prototype slices, but there's just a lot more planning, a lot more design documentation,
yeah.
a lot more sitting in a room and like hashing things out. Is that what that looks like for you? Is it, do you make a little model on the table and have little stick figures running through it? Like what does it look like to how do you de-risk this?
So we visualize in like programs like SketchUp so that we can, as best we can, see the space. In some cases, you can do the equivalent of a prototype. We have one room that has lasers, and we literally like we figured out where we wanted the lasers, and then we ran string, and we said, okay, let's make sure this is the right kind of the right density, the right thing that we want to have for the lasers. There's a lot of stuff that you can put yourself in the space, but there is a lot of it, much more than I would ever recommend to anybody for a product. There is a lot of it that is, you just have to trust your team and your process that this is going to do what you want it to do. The other thing is that a lot of what we do is about the immersion as much as the descriptive gameplay. And so that's like building a theater set. It's not, you sketch it out, you map, you think, okay, this is what we want it to look like. You have expertise in the materials, so you know what's going to hold up and what the effect is going to be. And then when you build it, you very likely are going to find some things you need to tweak. But if you have a team of people who have built this sort of thing over and over again, they're actually really pretty good at getting it, having the image that they have and having it show up that way.
Having it look good and feel good, even if some of the game mechanics maybe need to get tweaked or aren't
Yeah,
exactly what you
exactly.
want. Yeah.
Exactly.
And there's also, if I'm understanding correctly, you said you've got whatever it is, 20 something quests that are live at a time.
Yeah.
So even if one of the quests is mad, like people could just jump to another one and you
Yeah.
while you're figuring that out, right?
Yeah. And in fact, that's also like a really important part of the whole game design is like when you come out with a game, you want the whole audience for that game to love it. And you're designing a game, it's not for everybody, but like you've got, like you mentioned to me, you have like your community. And if you might have a game that was outside of that community, that's going to be a special challenge. Whereas when we're designing, we know that not everybody is going to love every quest. And part of what it's, if you go to a theme park and you have a friend who like, I don't like roller coasters, and you have another friend who's like, I love roller coasters, they may not do the same rides that day and they may both have a great time. When you come to Boda, some people want to do Ninja Warrior stuff. Some people, we have a quest called Potions where the average solve time, I'm not kidding, is over 20 hours. That's insane for a place where the longest ticket is 4 hours.
Wow.
If every
That is
quest we
crazy.
had if every quest we had was potions, we would be out of business and I'd be talking to you about another failure experience. Potions is a great quest for us that brings hardcore people who come and keep working at it. So part of it is, does the quest work? But the other part is, it works, like everything is working for some people, doesn't necessarily work for everybody. People have
Right.
different things that are their
The,
favorites.
the amusement park example is a great example for, right? Yeah, there's different rides for different people. I can enjoy Disney World in a way that's different than the way a 6-year-old's going to enjoy Disney World, or my
Yeah,
partner would enjoy Disney World. And so this is the thing. So I buy, just so I get the business model clear, it's like you buy a ticket for a certain number of hours.
yeah,
All of the quests have varying times to engage. I can jump into a quest as many times as I want, or switch quests as much as I want, as long as I've got the whatever's within the hour. And then there's some
exactly.
kind of tracking of some kind that say like my scoreboard, my personal, like how I've done and all the quests, which ones I've completed, which ones I haven't, so I can come back for the 20-hour quests and keep going, kind of thing.
So it's not that your progress in that quest is stored, but that your knowledge of it is built up over time. So
It's just, theoretically it could be solved quickly, but it's just too hard, so nobody does.
yes. So if my kids and I went to do potions, we would do it in a couple of minutes because we know how to do it.
Got it.
Figuring it out, getting through all the different steps takes a lot of trial and error. So the average solve time is quite long.
Fascinating. Okay, I cannot wait to experience it. This is a really fun transition into a very different type of design, and I'm glad that it's going well. For people that want to find Boda Borg or find you or any other things you want to link to, where do they go? How do they find you?
Yeah, sure. So Bodaborg, go to bodaborg.com/Boston to get to our location. You can also find us on social media at Bodaborg. We're active on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We're not currently active on X. And then I'm Chad Ellis. You're welcome to send me friend requests. And if you want to talk about negotiation, I'm happy to talk about that too.
I am glad that you accepted my friend request so many years ago, Chad. And
Oh,
this has been super fun to catch up. And I can't wait to see you in person in just 2 months or so. So
yeah.
I can't wait to try this actual amazing experience you've built.
Yeah, really looking forward to seeing you. And so great to be on your podcast. Always love spending time with you.
Game design is a craft. And like any craft, it gets better with structure, feedback, and repetition. You're able to learn better when you're surrounded by like-minded people who support each other and lift each other up. The Think Like a Game Designer Design Lab is designed to give you all of that. Over 60 lessons from idea to publishing, a private game design Discord, and exclusive bonuses for those who join now and have been longtime podcast listeners. It's also the lowest price I've ever offered these exclusive lessons. And so you don't need to wait for a new class or wait for another opportunity. This is the opportunity. If you're ready to level up, if you're ready to build a career that you're passionate about, build the game you've been dreaming of, this is your time. Go to justingarydesigns.com to learn more. And thanks for listening. Thank you for making this show possible through your pledges, podcast reviews, and enthusiasm on social media. Without your help, this show would not have been possible, and it's incredible how our community has grown. If you'd like to support the show and get access to more exclusive content from me and my guests, I recommend checking out justingarydesigns.com, where I've got weekly articles on game design and creativity, along with show notes, lessons from the podcast, and more exclusive insights to help you with your creative projects.